Good afternoon, guys. Uh, Welcome back. Hope you guys had a good, safe weekend. Remember, last week we were looking at the if, and else statements. Today, we actually going to start something new. I was actually going to be doing string handling with you people, but I realized that I actually need to do this with you before we actually look at string handling because we're going to need this structure to do some effective programs with regards to string handling. Okay, now quite often we need to actually repeat statements a specific number of times. For example, if I actually wanted to display the word Python 10 times, I would obviously need uh, I would need to go and print the word Python 10 times. I'm just going to, okay, so that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. So this is the thing though, that if I was running this over here, if I needed to display the word Python 10 times, I would actually need to have the print statement 10 times, which is not very effective because assuming I needed to display the word Python 1,000 times, that means I'm going to have to copy and paste this print statement 1,000 times, and which is not very effective as well, because what if the user is going to decide how many times this needs to be printed? So when looking at the for statement, right? When you're looking at your for loop, now your for loop actually goes through a sequence of values from beginning to end. So basically it has a start value and it has a stop value. Now the structure of the for loop is as follows. And whatever is in purple, those are keywords, right? So for, and we actually have use a variable, we can use any variable, and sequence is basically my start and stop values as to how many times or uh, the values that I actually want to go through to actually display. And like the if statement, we use indentation, right? With Python, when we have put a colon over there, automatically when we press enter, it indents for us, and that would be the body of the loop. And you can have as many statements inside the body of the loop, right? Now, the for loop can actually be used to go through different types of sequences, people, right? But for our purposes this year, we're going to concentrate only on numbers. Now, before we actually look at the numbers, right? Just want to show you guys something. Nope. No. Mm-mm. Give me a moment. Okay, here we go. Right. Check this out. If I had, we could actually have a list. Now, remember, last week we looked at sets, and remember, sets actually have um, curly brackets, right? I'm just going to show you something called a list. A list has square brackets. You need to understand that a list has square brackets. And I'm just going to go in over here and go with apple, banana, peach, and apricot. So this list, my variable name for my list is called my list. My list actually has 1, 2, 3, 4 values, right? And I'm just showing you this. We're not actually going to be using this week. I'm just showing you how it would work and what it actually does. So if I say 4, let's assume I use a variable called x. Now remember we said in, for x in my list. So what's my list? My list is apple, banana, peach, and apricot. So for x in my list, what exactly does this do, right? I just need to show you this so you can understand what X, what values X actually takes on, right? So once again, my variable is called mylist. My list has the following values for fruit, for X in is the keyword, mylist, and print X. Now, check it out. Apple, banana, peach, apricot. Now, where is that actually coming from? You see, guys, and you need to understand this, okay? You need to understand this. For X in my list, what happens is X will point to the first value, and all the values are separated by commas, right? When X is pointing to the first value, which is apple, print X, it'll print apple. So X actually takes on the value apple first, then the second time round, okay, I'm just going to, okay, we have line numbers here, so you can understand what I'm doing. From line 3, the first time line 3 is executed, X will take on apple, it will display apple. From line 4, now remember, X hasn't reached the end of the list, right? Because apple is just the first value. So after line 4 is executed, it will jump back to line 3. And now X will point to banana and it will display banana. From line 4, it jumps back to line 3. And now X will point to peach and it will display peach. And from line 4, it will jump back to line 3 and X will be pointing to apricot and it will display apricot. And obviously that's the end of the loop. And then it would come here, right? And I could actually do this and I could say, that's the end of the loop. Now, how many times will line 5 be executed? Now, line 5, remember, is in line with the 4, so it's outside of the for loop. So if you can run this again, okay, check it out. It'll display apple, banana, peach, and apricot, and that will be executed after the loop has been completed. Now, I told you that we are going to be dealing mainly with numbers, right? I just needed you to understand how. In our for statement, we have a variable, and that variable will actually point to the different values. Yes, Kotluana. Yes. Uh, unmute. Question, guys? No. Okay. Now, I told you that we are in a number. So let's look here. Let us consider the following. That we actually have a called range. Range, and inside here, right? B is a number. B is a number, right? So the range method generates values from 0 to b minus 1. So what does that actually mean? If I said range 5, it will generate values. Now, the first value will always be 0, 2, 3, 4. You'll notice that there are 5 values here, but it's actually starting at 0. So in other words, I've got 5 over here. The largest value, the last value, 5 minus 1, which is actually 4. So coming back here, right? It's going to make that comment, right? Now, for X in range is the keyword, that's why it's in purple, and I said 5 colon and print X. So what would this actually do? Okay, we'll go back up, right? So can you see the value 2, 4? So if you're looking at this, right, maximum value 5 per x. Got it. Now, what happened? Now, remember, each time I actually want to display this, I could go and change the value to 15, right? Now, what does this actually mean? Check it out. 0 to 14. Now, what does this actually mean? Let's look at this. The first value, x will, now I've just got range and what value. So the first value is 0. So the first time, what value does x take on? It'll take on. From line 9, it will go to line. Okay? Then x will increase by 1. Right? Each time x is increased. So x was 0. 0 plus 1 is 1. So the next value will be 1. And 2, and 3, and 4, and it keeps increasing. Okay? It keeps increasing. Now, that is one way of it, which is not a very, very useful way, because sometimes we need to start with value 1, right? We need to start with value 1, right? So let's assume I want to display 1 to 10. I could use range like this. I could indicate, specify, that's my start value, comma, and I'm saying, now pay careful attention. What did I say? That what will be the last value that will be displayed? What is this value? 10. The last value will be 10 minus 1, which is 9. Let's go and run it and see what happens. So what's my start value? The first value x is going to take on 1. The last value will take on be 10 minus 1, which is the last value. Go check it out. There you go. Start value 1. And if you count the number of values, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 9, can you see that? Now, how do we work out just by looking at this? How many times this loop will run? How many times will this run? That means how many times will line 9 be executed? It's basically you take that value, subtract the first value. 10 minus 9. It will display from to 9. All right, let's change it. Let's make that and make that 12. Now, before I actually write, what values, what's the first value that will display? What's the first value indicating here? 3. It will start at 3. And what number will it end at? It will end at 11. Whatever this value is, whatever the second value, it will be 1 less than. All right. How many times will line 9 be executed? Like I just said now, 12 minus 3, and that's 9. Okay. So let's run it and see if 9 values are actually displayed. There we go. Starting value 3, last value counted 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9. All right. So you might be given a program that a for loop that on paper and ask you, okay, how many times will line 9 be executed? And you can put that from there. Now, just remember that each time we actually want to do this, right? Each time we actually want to do this, we can go and change of that depending on how much time we want to run it. Now, okay? Just check. Okay, now, let's look at this. Use the variable n to store the values from 1 to 10 and display all the stored in it. So the question is asking us what? Now remember, I am just going to assign the values 1 to 10 to n. How do I do that? I'm going to come here and say n is a sign, range, and remember I want the values from 1 to 10. So it'll be 1, comma. Now I want the last value to be 10. Now if I put 10 over here, my last value, it would be 9. So that should actually be 11. Now that will go to 10. But remember, the values 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 10 is stored in n. Now I need a formula for x in n. For x in n. What is n? N is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Hold on. Go on. And I come here and say print x. Okay. Now remember in the previous program, I used the range in the for statement. Now what am I? Now I am assigning the range to a variable. I am assigning the range to a variable, and I'm using the variable statement. It's actually the same thing. So if we run this, right? If we run that, there you go. We've got 1 to 10. Okay. Now I want to display the values from 1 to 10. So therefore, whatever my maximum value is, the second argument over here will be 1 more. Okay. For x in n, n is the range from 1 to 10. You get x. Now, let's assume I want to display. Let's see, here we go. So here we go. Now tell me something. Or could you think about it? Okay, guys. So okay, just give me a moment, guys. Just give me a moment. Brianni, just give me a moment. All right, guys, that should be fine now. Okay, so looking at this, we are looking at n being from 1 to 11, 1 to 11, right? Remember, the maximum value would be 10. Now, each time I want this loop to run a different number of times, I have to physically, as a program, come here and change it. Now, we're going to look at something different. What if we actually ask the user to enter the value, right? So we are basically changing the question now. I am going to ask the user, right, using our input statement, input, enter a value for n, right? So the user is going to enter a number. That number is going to go to n. So now the user will decide how many times the loop is going to run. Just remember that, right? That in my range statement, I have a start value and I have a stop value. My stop value will always be 1 less than what value I actually put it in. So pay careful attention. I'm going to go for x in range. I'm going to start at 1 and I'm going to stop at n. Now, tell me, if I entered 5 for n, if I entered 5, right? We'll just look at that now. If I entered 5, print x, let's run that, right? And I just want you to see what happens. Okay, right. I'm entering 5, and it's only displaying 1 to 4. Why? Because remember I told you, whatever value is here, it'll be 1 less than that. But I actually want the numbers 1 to 5 to be displayed. So what do I do to this n? It must increase by 1. So whatever n is, we put an n plus 1 there, right? And it will. So if I entered 5, this will actually be 6, and it'll go from 1 to 5. Because remember, it's 1 less than that last value, right? 5, and it will display 1 to 5. So now we are giving the user control as to how many times that loop will actually run. Now, in reading in, when we ask the user to enter a number, right? When we ask the user to enter a number, we can do lots and lots of things. For example, we can ask the user to enter how many times they want the word Python to be displayed. So check this out, right? Go here and say strx plus okay, plus and Python. Now, what is this? What's the first value x takes on? 1. So it's going to 1 and the word Python. Then x will become 2. It'll output 2 and the word Python. Who decides how many times the word Python is displayed? The user, person using the program, the person that's going to enter the state. So if I entered, 6 here, there it outputs. Remember, this 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. It's this here. Okay, step up there, and then obviously the Python. Now, if this is the beautiful thing about your phone. Ready for it? If I went and said 1,000, there you go. Can you see that? That loop is going to take on, x is going to take on 1 up until 1,000. Okay. Can you see that? Last value 1,000. So we can give the user control as to how many times a loop will run. Okay. So looking at that there, right? Yeah, check this out. Okay. Okay. That's okay. Now, remember, we are giving the user control, right? We are giving control. I'm saying display the number from 1 to 20, increasing each time by 2. So that means x each time must be by 2. I'm going to show you something a little bit different with the range, right? We're just going to work 1 to 20 for now. Come back to the end. So actually, the number. All right. So we've got 1 to 20. Okay. So I need, now at the moment, for x in range. Now remember, I want 1 to 20, so it's going to be 1 to 21. It must be 1. All right. And print x. So if we run this, okay, it displayed the numbers 1 to 20. Now, what if I want to display the numbers 1 to 20, but each time I want the value of x to increase by 2. So what's the first value x takes? That's your first value, 1. If I add 2 to that, it must be 3, and then 5, and then 7, then 9. Get the idea, guys? So with our range statement, remember, we can have a single value, we can have a start and stop value, and then we have a third argument. Remember, the argument in the range. We have a third argument that will tell Python how many to increase x by each time. I want to increase it by 2. I'm going to put 2. Right. Sorry. So it's going to start at 1. The next time it's going to come to the loop, it's going to increase it by 2 each time. So let's go to this. There we go. The first value is 1. Then the next time it runs, it adds 2 to the 1, which gets 3. The next time it runs, it adds 2 to 3 to get 5. The next time it runs, it adds 2 to 5 to get 7, etc., etc. All right. So if you look at that, but most of the time, guys, we are at 2, right? Because obviously that is not going to help us a lot. Okay, and see why just now. So okay, let's look at this. Display all even numbers between 1 and 30. Now remember, it said between 1 and 30. That means it must, obviously it's going to go from 1 to 30, but only going to display only the even number. Is it going to include 30? 30 isn't even. Is it going to include 30? Ask me. I spoke to you about from 1 to 30 and between. Okay, so this is going to exclude 30, right? So our last value will be 30, not 31. Now, how do we check for an even number? And we did this last week with the if statement. So we're going to go for x in range 1, 30. Now, how do we check if x is an even number? Remember the mod function, guys? Right? Remember, if we divide any number by 2, if the remainder is 0, it's an even number. So now I'm going to show you how you actually can incorporate your if statement inside of for statement, inside of for. So we could actually come here and do this. If x mod 2 equals 0, that means if I divide x by 2 and my remainder is 0, then only x. So each time x takes on a new value, it's going to check if x is divisible by 2. This is what it's checking if x is divisible by 2. If you divide any number by 2 and the remainder is the number. So there you go. From 1 to 30, between 1 to 32, 4, 6, 8, 10. Can you see that guy? Now, these are even, right? So you can see how you can actually take your if statement. That is why the if statement separately, right? Because we can actually combine your for loop and your if statement to do many, many different things. Now, tell me something, guys. What if I want to display all the odd? What must my remainder? If I take any odd number and divide it by 2, my remainder is always, always, always 1. So if the remainder is 1, when I divide by 2, if the remainder is 1, would this be? Can you see that? 1, 3, 5, 7, right? These are all odd numbers. Okay. So if you think of it, right, we can do lots of stuff. Now, I am checking, and since we're talking about it, what am I checking? I'm checking if it's even. Now, what if I wanted to see if the in display all the values? I'm just going to say to change the right display all numbers between 1 and 30 that are multiples of 3 that are okay, multiples of 3. Now, how right? Multiples of 3. I want to check if this number is divisible by 3. Because if it's divisible by 3, that means x is a multiple and 3 would be a factor. So if I divide it by 3 and my remainder is 0, it means it's a multiple of 3. What are the multiples of 3 from 1 to 30, guys? It'll be 3. 3 can be, 3 is a multiple of 3 times 1 is 3. 6 times 2 is 6 times, sorry, 3 times 2 is 6. 3 times 3 is 9. 3 times 4 is 12. So it's basically 3, 6, 9, 12. It's all, you increase it by 3 each time. So there you go. Every single number of A can be divided by 3. Every single number can be divided by 3. So those are multiples of 3. Do you see that? So you will see, sure you understand how useful your for loop actually when you combine it with an if statement. Now, we looked at even, we looked at odd, right? At the moment, all we're doing over here is we are specifying the stop value, which is 30 or 29. We are specifying. Now, what happens if we want the user to actually do that? Okay, it's not that. Let's look at this. Read in N and display the timetable for N from 1 to 12. For example, if we ask the user to enter number 3, then it must also obviously output what's 3 times 1, 3 times 2, 3 times 1 is 3, 3 times 2 is 6, 3 times 3 is 9, 3 times 4 is 12, etc., up to 6. So the user is going to enter this value. My loop is going to go from 1 to 12. Okay, so the user, we're reading it, and is assigned int input enter a number. So the user is going to enter a number and we need to display the timetable from of the n timetable from 1 to 12, right? So my loop for x in range, now guys, to go from 1 to 12, my start value is 1. If I wanted to stop at 12, this next value must be 1 more than 12, which will be, I'm going to write 12 plus 1. So you understand the plus 1. It's always 1. All right. You'll see why just now. Okay. Then, don't get the colon. Then I'm going to display print x times n. Okay. So if I enter 3, it must output 3, 6, 9, 12, 15, 18, 21, 24, 27, 30, 36. So let's go to I'm at 3. There we go. 3, 6, 9, 12. That's your timetable. You see that? Now, doesn't look very useful. I mean, studying this primary school timetable, they could actually enter any number. Now, how would I make this more usable? And this is exactly what I do, right? I'm actually going to make this a little different. Okay, I'm going to come here, say answer is assigned x times n. That's going to be my answer, and I'm changing the state. I'm going to make it a little bit more user friendly. And how am I going to do that? I'm going to say strx plus time plus strn plus plus str answer. Can you see that, guys? What's the first value x takes on? 1. It's going to come and say 1 times 3 equals 3. 2 times 3 equals, actually, let's change this. Make it n and make that x. Let's see what happens. Let's see what it is like. Is it more user friendly? So, 3. Can you see that, guys? That makes a hell of sense. It makes, right? 3 times 1 equals 3. 3 times 2 equals 6. 3 times 3 equals 9. Now remember, the good thing about this program is this. We can enter any value. So I have great difficulty in remembering 14 times 14 times 8. Check it out. You just enter a number and you put it on board. Okay. So who has control of what is going to display? The user, because the user is the one that is entering the number. Okay. More time. If I win, if I have entered 16, 17, there you go. All right. So it basically work on any time. The user decides what time to actually work. Now, what are we doing? Over here, we only went to 12, right? What if I wanted the user to decide how many times the loop is going to run? Okay, so let's go to this. Read in n and determine an output, the squares of all numbers from 1 to n squares. Now, square. We power of uh, number, number, number 2. Now, we need to read in n. And is assigned in the class because input always inputs string. Okay, so enter a number. Okay, and I want to display the squares of all numbers. So my loop must go from 1 to n. Now remember, if I put n there, if n was 5, it's only going to go up to 4. If I wanted to go up to 5, I must add 1 to it. This is what can you see how I put plus 1? That's exactly, that's why, sorry, that's why I actually put the plus 1. So let's check it out, guys. 4x in 1, sorry, range, and it's 1, n plus 1. But we wanted to go from 1 to n. All right. And we need to display that number squared. So it's going to print and power. And what's it going to be, guys? X comma 2 to square. All right. Excuse me. So it's not going to be very user-friendly now. If I enter the number 5, it's going to output 1 squared, which is 1, 2 squared, 4, 3 squared, 9, 4 squared, 16, and 5 squared, 25. Can you see that? 1, 4, 9, 5. But it's not very user-friendly, right? It is not very user-friendly. So if we want it to be user-friendly, right, I'm going to here use the answer is a sign half of x 2. Remember, x will take on 1, then x will take 2, x will take on 3, and I'm going to come here and change. And I'm going to str x plus squared equal plus str, let's convert it to string, answer, right? So what's the first value x going to take on? 1. 1 squared equals 1. 2 squared equals 4. See? It's a lot friendly now. See that? Right? 1 squared, 2 squared, 3 squared. And once again, like I told you, you can decide, or the user can decide how many times, what numbers they are to display. So for example, if I went 35, it's going to output 1 squared, 2 squared, 3 squared, up to 35. Can you see that? Up to 35 squared, which is 5. Okay, so who decides how many times the loop is going to run? In this instance, when the user is entering a value n, the user will decide or will determine how many times that. Important thing is this, though, that you need to understand that you have 4, you have to pair, and x will take on each value each time, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4, because each time. Okay, now here's the thing, right? What if this is something that, yeah, before, right? Yeah, I was talking about displaying something, but look, at the moment, this is what's going to happen, right? With this program. Okay, I'm going to go for x in range 1, 7, and print x. You got to get what will this do? It will display the values 1, 2, 10. What if I wanted to display the value 10, 9, 8, 7? I want it backwards. Now, there are two ways of actually doing that, right? There are two ways of actually doing this. Okay. Firstly, what did I tell you? That the third parameter is telling us how many to increase it by. Yes or no? So check this out. If I want from 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 2, 1, yes or no? So I'm going to go from 10 to 0, from a high number to a low. And each time I'm going to decrease it by 1, by minus 1. Can you see that? So I'm going to start. What's the first value x will take off? 10. The next number, 10 minus 1, which will be 9. The next number, 9 minus 1. Can you see that, guy? It will never get to 0. It will be 1, 4, 0, which is 1. Can you see that? So sometimes in a question, we might need to go through a loop backwards. Okay, and when we do string hand, you will see why that is useful. All right. Now, we were looking at, now this is what concept. This is something that we didn't look at. We can only look at it with loops. So this is the important. And you need to understand this concept because this concept is used quite often. Right, let's look at the question. Read in an integer value, n. So who's going to enter the value of n? The user. And determine an output. All even numbers from 1 to n. All even numbers. Okay? And we want to determine also output. How many even numbers? How many? How many? Now, if I enter the value 10, how many? 5. That means my program must not only just determine an output, but must do. It must count it. Now, this is introducing a concept of a counter variable. Now, what is a counter variable? A counter variable is any variable inside an if statement. Well, it doesn't have to be, right? But each time something happens, it will increase by 1. So a counter variable is any variable that will increase by 1 each time something happens. So let's look at this here. Okay. So I'm going to go n is assigned int input enter a number. Okay. Then I'm going to go for x in range. Range, remember, from 1 to n plus. Yeah. First things first, the a part. Display the even number. So if x mod 2 equals 0, then print x. So that's the first part, right? We just checking will the first part. Okay, so if I enter the number 10, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, that's displaying my even number. Now I need, after I print it, I need a counter variable. I'm going to call it count. And each time count must increase count plus 1, and error, right? And then outside all of it, outside the if, can you see that? If this is cursor now is in line with the 4, say print str count there are plus str count plus even number. Okay, now I should get an error. Can you see that, guys? Let's look at that error. Name error. Name count is not defined. Remember, I told you last week when we were using the message variable that before an if statement, whenever we use a variable inside an if statement, before that, we need to give it an initial value. Before that, we need to give it an initial value. And I told you this last week, we need to initialize it. So you will always initialize a counter variable to the value 0. You will always initialize a counter variable to the value 0 because we want to start with 0. So if this is true, then count will become 0 plus 1 is 1, and count will become 1. The next time it finds an even number, count is 1. 1 plus 1 is 2, count will be 2, and so forth and so forth. So let's check it out. If I enter the number 10, there you go. There are 5 even. This is the count variable. This is the count variable. So whenever we're using a counter variable, before the loop, right? Whenever we're using a counter variable, before the loop, it's just there are instances where we'll initialize it to other values, but counter value, right? So we initialize. Initialize comes from the word initial. We give it an initial value. We give it a starting value, right? And each time something is true, the counter variable is by 1. All right. Okay. So if you look at that there, right, it's pretty straightforward. The user is entering n. We initialize our counter variable to 0. Our x will go from 1 to n plus 1. So less than that. If each value of x is divisible by 2, that it has a value of 0, it's going to display, and it's also going to increase count by 1 each time. All right. So right. So that was your counter variable. You see that, guys? Okay. Let's look at this. So remember, we initialize our counter variable. You can see to the left-hand side of the screen over there to 0. Now let's look at this question. Right? This is a different type of variable. Right? So if you look at this here, reading n and display the numbers from 1 to n. So it's displaying the numbers. And we must determine and output the sum of all numbers to n. So once again, n is assigned int input enter number, right? Remember, it's going to enter a string. Int is going to cast it into an integer. Now, remember we said count is assigned 0. Each time something happens, count increased by 1 on the left-hand side. Can you see that? Now, we need something called an accumulator. An accumulator means it accumulates all values that are coming. And we are going to use a variable called sum, and sum will always be initialized to 0 as well. So this is called an accumulator. Accumulator, it accumulates, it gets together, gathers together. All right, so let's check it out. For x in range 1 of n of 1. Right, so you get 1 plus 1, right? Then we are going to print x. Also, I'm going to come and say sum is assigned sum plus x. So the first value x will take on 1. Sum is 0. Sum is 0. It'll 0 plus 1 is 1. Then sum will become 1. Then x will be 2. X will become 2. It'll output 2. Sum is assigned sum plus x. Sum is 1 now. 1 plus 2 is 3. Can you see that, guys? Okay. So what I'm going to do is just change this. Okay, so change this just so you can see the running total of sum. Okay, so I'm going to come here. I'm going to print x here and print str x, right, plus that. Okay, and plus str sum. Right. So you can see what's happening with sum each time. Right. I'm going to enter the number 10. Pick it up. This is x. So now 1, sum is 1. Then x becomes 2, 2. Now check this out. 2 plus 1 will give me 3. Then x will become 3. 3 plus 3 will give me 6. This is my sum. See that? Right? Can you see that? Okay. So let's just a little bit. And before okay, what is that? That is the heading because it is before. All right. So the number 10, there you go. These are all the x values. This is how something, like I told you, first step is 1. 2 plus 1, 3. 3 plus 3, 6. 4 plus 6, 10. 5 plus 10, 3. You see that? So what is sum doing? It is accumulating. All right. So we looked today at the range. We looked at reading in n. We looked at a counter variable. We looked at a sum, right? So a counter variable is count increasing by 1 each time, and an accumulator, right? Accumulates, right? Increases by each time. All right. We will continue with this tomorrow. So you guys have a good afternoon. Thank you so much for joining us, and we will see you tomorrow at 2. Right? Good afternoon, guys. Take care.